Okay, let's unpack this. We're launching into a deep dive on Neo-Aristotelian metaphysics.
Right.
And for you, the listener, this isn't just, some dusty history lesson.
Not at all.
We are actually using Aristotle's ancient toolkit concepts from over 2,000 years ago to frame and maybe even solve some really fundamental questions about reality today.
Exactly. Things like basic categories of existence, how things persist through change, how a statue is even a thing. It spans a lot.
It's pretty amazing, actually, how relevant it still feels. It really shows how philosophy kind of builds on itself, doesn't it?
It really does. We're not always inventing things from scratch. We're engaging with this incredibly rich historical framework to structure these big debates we're having right now about categories, substance, persistence, composition.
And the sources we looked at really emphasize that engagement is the key thing here.
Yes, that's crucial.
Which brings up a point. What does Neo-Aristotelian even mean?
Yeah.
Our sources seem pretty clear. It's not like a fixed set of beliefs.
No, definitely not. It's not a doctrine where you have to tick all the boxes.
Right. So you could be a Neo-Aristotelian and hold, say, a modern view like trope theory, or be an endurantist about time, but maybe reject other parts of Aristotle's system.
Precisely. The real unifier, the thing that makes someone Neo-Aristotelian in this context, is more about methodology. It's a willingness to actually engage with Aristotle's concepts.
So seeing his framework as a potentially fruitful way to start thinking about problems.
Exactly that. It's like an intellectual starting point, maybe an anchor. Even if the logical path leads you somewhere Aristotle himself wouldn't have gone, or maybe even argued against. The starting point, the engagement, that's the common thread.
Okay. But that raises a big question then. If the goal in metaphysics is ultimately truth, why bother with historical fidelity? Why dig into Aristotle specifically?
Yeah. That's the classic tension between the historian of philosophy and the working metaphysician.
They have different goals, right?
Completely different. The historian is after fidelity. What did Aristotle really mean in 4th century BC Athens? What was the context?
Whereas the metaphysician is asking, is this idea true?
Yeah.
Does it work logically? Does it explain things?
Exactly. For the metaphysician today, historical accuracy is, nice to have, maybe informative, but it's secondary to logical coherence and explanatory power. Is the position sound? That's the main thing.
But that doesn't mean history is useless for the metaphysician. Our sources pointed out, 3 specific ways historical study actually helps contemporary philosophy move forward.
Yes, 3 really important contributions. The first one is maybe the most subtle. History helps us spot vestiges.
Vestiges, like leftover bits.
Kind of. Think of them as old, maybe unnoticed assumptions or bits of conceptual baggage we've carried over from past debates without realizing it.
Like an example.
Well, say we're debating how science relates to philosophy. We might unconsciously be using assumptions about philosophy being totally separate, totally autonomous, that really stem from a specific split back in the early modern period.
Assumptions we might not even agree with if we thought about them directly.
Precisely. But they still shape how we frame the discussion. History helps us dig those out, examine them, and clean up our conceptual toolkit.
Okay, so history as conceptual archaeology. Makes sense. What was the second contribution?
The second is that history throws up rivals to our current ways of thinking, especially our reliance on intuition.
How so?
Think about someone like Spinoza. He followed the principle of sufficient reason with ruthless logic, right? And he ended up with these incredibly radical, deeply counterintuitive conclusions about God and nature.
Yeah, not exactly common sense.
Not at all. And engaging with thinkers like him shows us there are powerful, alternative ways to do philosophy that didn't prioritize making things comfortable or aligning with our immediate gut feelings. It challenges the idea that intuition should always be the final judge.
That feels important. If everyone I talk to now thinks X is intuitive, how do we know we aren't just stuck in some kind of philosophical echo chamber?
And that leads directly to the third point. Historical scholarship helps calibrate our intuitions.
Calibrate them? How?
Well, we naturally adjust our beliefs based on the people around us, our immediate philosophical community. But history expands that community massively. When you engage with thinkers from radically different times and cultures whose whole way of seeing the world was different.
You get a wider perspective to test your own obvious intuitions against.
Exactly. It helps you see if what feels like common sense to you is genuinely universal, or maybe just a product of, the way philosophers think right now, a kind of professional habit.
So the overall goal isn't to become Aristotle scholars per se, but to use his system and others as a kind of high-powered historical baseline.
Yes, precisely. To judge our own progress. To assess whether a supposedly new idea is genuinely novel or just a rehash of something debated centuries ago.
Without that historical context, we can't really know if we're moving forward or just rediscovering old wheels.
Exactly. If you don't know the history, how can you reliably judge novelty? An idea might seem new compared to last year's journals, but if it was fiercely debated 50 years ago in a different tradition, well, it's not new, is it? History provides that essential yardstick for philosophical development.
Okay, that methodological grounding is super helpful. Let's take this toolkit now and apply it to the first big area, category theory. This is Aristotle trying to carve reality at its highest joints. Right.
That's the ambition, yes. Neo-Aristotelian category theory aims to figure out the highest ontological kinds, the most fundamental classifications of what exists.
And these aren't meant to be just like convenient labels for us.
No, the goal is realist. There's supposed to be objective divisions in reality itself, independent of our minds or interests, finding the world's natural structure.
Aristotle's own method for finding his famous 10 categories, substance, quality, quantity, relation, and so on, was kind of practical, wasn't it? Looking at language, looking at educated opinions, the endoxa.
It was. He looked at how we talk about things, what sorts of questions we ask, what is it, how much, what kind. But the real cleverness, the structural genius, is in the two kinds of predication he identified.
Ah, the set of and the present in ties. These are crucial.
Absolutely critical. They underpin the whole system.
Okay, let's unpack the first one. Set of, what does that capture?
Set of is the infer-categorical link. Within a category, it connects, say, a species to an individual or a genus to a species.
Like when we say human is set of Socrates.
Exactly. You're linking a universal kind, human, to a particular member, Socrates. And importantly, this relationship is about essence and synonymy. If human is defined by rationality, then Socrates, being human, is also rational. The definition applies down the chain. It sets up that vertical hierarchy within the category of substance.
Got it. Species, genus, individual, all linked by set of. Now, what about present in? That's the cron category one.
Yes. Present in links things across different categories. Specifically, it links non-substances, accidents, to substances.
So white is present in Socrates.
Precisely. Here, you're linking a quality whiteness to a substance, Socrates, and crucially, this link is not synonymous. Socrates is white, but Socrates is definitely not a quality. Whiteness is a quality.
Ah, so that stops everything collapsing into one big category.
It does. It maintains the distinctness of the categories. And this distinction immediately lets Aristotle generate his famous fourfold classification of everything that exists. It just falls out of these two relations.
Right, just to be super clear. Set of is essential, vertical hierarchy. Present in is accidental, horizontal attachment to a subject.
You've got it. And the four kinds of things are: 1, individual substances, like Socrates. They aren't set of anything else nor present in anything else as a subject. They are the subjects.
Okay.
2, universal substances, like the species, human. Set of individuals, like Socrates, but not present in a subject.
Right.
3, universal non-substances, like the general quality color, present in subjects, like Socrates, and also set of more specific universals, like whiteness.
And the last one.
4, individual non-substances. Think of this specific patch of white on Socrates right now. It's present in Socrates, but it's a particular instance, so it's not said of anything further down.
Wow, okay. That's a neat structure derived just from how things are predicated.
Well,
But contemporary category theory faces big challenges trying to nail down criteria for what actually counts as a fundamental category, doesn't it? It can't just be an arbitrary list.
no, it needs principled reasons. A category has to be more than just any partition of objects. It needs to be somehow highly general, natural, not gerrymandered.
And there are loads of questions, right? Like, do categories have to be mutually exclusive? Do they have to cover everything? Is there only one right set of categories?
All of those. And a really deep one. What's their modal status? Are they necessary, true in all possible worlds? Or could reality fundamentally have been structured differently with different highest kinds?
The traditional vibe, maybe borrowed from maths, is that these deep metaphysical truths have to be necessary.
That's often the assumption. But if you're a realist about categories, shouldn't they, in principle, be sensitive to what we find out about the world?
Like if physics tells us space and time aren't separate, but are this unified space-time thing?
Then a truly realist category scheme might need revising. It can't just be dictated a priori. This whole issue forces a distinction between what you might call strong and weak category theories.
Okay, so a weak theory is useful, but maybe a bit arbitrary.
A weak theory is basically just a classification of what seem to be natural, high-level kinds. Maybe it relies on tradition, maybe just stipulation. Its main job, perhaps, is just helping us spot philosophical mistakes, category errors.
Like Ryle's famous critique of Descartes, the ghost in the machine thing.
That's the classic example. Ryle argued Descartes made a category error by treating mind as if it were the same kind of thing as body, just spookier. He put it in the wrong logical box.
Although, applying that category error argument consistently is hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you prove definitively that mind and body belong to fundamentally incompatible highest kinds, rather than just being different sorts of things under a broader heading like entity?
Exactly. That's the difficulty and why you might want a strong theory that's a weak theory, plus some actual principled, informative criteria for what makes something a highest category beyond just being very general.
And this is where, according to our sources, we hit the really deep Aristotelian insight, the one that often gets missed in modern discussions, the idea of core-dependent homonymy.
Yes. This is arguably the original central motivation for Aristotle needing categories in the first place. And it's because being existence itself is not a genus. It can't be the single highest kind.
Why not? That sounds like the most obvious candidate for the top category.
It seems intuitive, but there's a nasty logical problem. If being were the highest genus, then the differentiae that carve it up into species, like substance versus quality, would also have to be. They'd have to exist.
Okay.
The problem is, a genus can't be predicated of its own differentiae on their own, only of the species that result. It leads to a logical regress or contradiction. Aristotle realized being doesn't function like a normal genus.
So if being isn't a unifying genus, how on earth can you have a systematic science of being? Isn't that what metaphysics or ontology is supposed to be?
This is where the cleverness comes in. You build it through focal connection. Aristotle argued being isn't a genus, but a core-dependent homonym.
Homonym?
Yeah.
Like a word with multiple meanings.
Sort of, yes. Being is said in many ways, it's multivocal, but, and this is the crucial part, all those different ways of being are related back to, organized around, one central primary meaning: substance.
Okay, I need an analogy here.
Think of the word healthy. A diet can be healthy. A person can be healthy. Your complexion can look healthy. Exercise is healthy.
Referent uses.
Different uses, but they aren't random. The diet is healthy because it produces health. The complexion is healthy because it indicates health. The exercise maintains health. All the senses point back to the core concept, the actual state of health in an organism.
I see. So being works like that. Everything that is, in whatever way it is, relates back to substance.
Exactly. To be a quality is to be an affection of a substance. To be a quantity is to be a measure of a substance. To be a relation is to hold between substances or their properties. Substance acts as the central core, the focal point, that holds the whole system of being together.
Wow, so that's how you get a unified science of being. Even though being itself isn't one big category, it's unified by its focus on substance.
Precisely. And this completely reframes the debate. Many modern category theorists just assume entity or object or being is the top category and go from there. They often miss Aristotle's original problem, the failure of being as a genus, and therefore miss the primary reason for the categories structured the way they are.
So contemporary Neo-Aristotelians either need to recover that focal connection idea, or they need to find some new principled reason for having a strong category theory.
That's the challenge, yes.
Okay, that structural map is super important. It sets the stage for talking about the actual kinds of things that exist within that structure. Let's move to part 2. Properties and relations. The basic puzzle here is attribute agreement, right?
Yeah, the classic problem of universals and one guys. Why do different things, say, this white piece of paper and that white cloud, resemble each other? What explains the shared whiteness?
And this leads to the 3 big rival theories. First up, realism.
Realism about universals, yeah. This view says there's literally one thing, the universal whiteness, which is somehow present in or instantiated by both the paper and the cloud. It's a shared, repeatable entity.
Ontologically quite expensive, though. You got particulars and these universal things.
It is. It posits an extra layer of reality. That's why people look for alternatives, like nominalism.
Nominalism tries to be minimal. Class nominalism, for instance, says whiteness just refers to the set or class of all white particular things. Agreement is just belonging to the same set.
Right. It tries to explain resemblance, just using particulars and sets, no spooky universals needed.
But nominalism hits some really serious snags, doesn't it? Especially if it equates properties directly with sets.
Devastating snags, yeah. The first big one is the coextension problem. Imagine, just possibly, that every creature with a heart, a chordate, also happens to be, throughout all time, a creature with kidneys, a renate, and vice versa.
So the set of chordates and the set of renates contain exactly the same members.
Exactly the same members. If properties are just sets, then class nominalism is forced to say that being a chordate and being a renate are the very same property, which is obviously false. Having a heart isn't the same thing as having kidneys.
And even if that specific example isn't actually true, you get necessary coextension with things like triangular and trilateral.
Precisely. By definition, anything that is triangular is trilateral and vice versa. Their extensions must be identical in all possible worlds. So the nominalist has to say they're the same property, which again, seems wrong. They pick out different features, having 3 angles versus having 3 sides.
Okay, so coextension is one major hurdle. What else?
The other killer argument is Goodman's imperfect community. This shows nominalism doesn't just fail to distinguish properties, it actually overgenerates them.
How does that work?
Imagine 3 objects. A is a red wooden sphere, B is a black wooden cube, C is a black metal sphere.
Okay.
Now, A resembles B, both wooden, B resembles C, both black, and A resembles C, both spheres. So every pair of objects in this set, A, B, C, resembles each other in some respect.
Right.
According to simple class nominalism, which defines properties via sets where members resemble each other, this set A, B, C should correspond to some property. But intuitively, there's no single property that all 3 share.
Ah, I see. The pairwise resemblance doesn't guarantee a shared resemblance across the whole set. Nominalism mistakes pairwise resemblance for a genuine shared property.
Exactly. It generates bogus properties. These problems led many philosophers toward a middle ground: trope theory.
So tropes, these aren't universals, and they aren't just particulars. What are they?
Tropes are properties conceived as particular individuals. So the whiteness of this piece of paper is a particular entity. A trope, let's call it snowy. The whiteness of that cloud is another numerically distinct particular entity, cloudy.
So properties aren't repeatable.
Not strictly repeatable, no. Snowy and cloudy are distinct individuals, but they can, and in this case do, perfectly resemble each other. Attribute agreement is explained by resemblance between particular tropes, not by sharing a universal.
And how does this help with the nominalist problems?
Well, it solves coextension easily. Even if the set of objects with heart tropes is the same as the set of objects with kidney tropes, the set of heart tropes is still distinct from the set of kidney tropes because the tropes themselves are distinct particulars. So chordate and renate remain distinct properties.
And it avoids the imperfect community because resemblance holds between individual tropes, not just the objects bearing them.
Right, and it's arguably more parsimonious than realism because you only need one fundamental category of thing particulars, even if some of those particulars, tropes, are quite unusual. You don't need particulars and universals.
This naturally leads to asking, where did Aristotle stand? Was he a trope theorist? He definitely talks about non-substantial individuals, right? Like the particular grammar existing in Socrates.
He certainly does accept individual accidents, yes. The specific instance of paleness in Socrates, for example, that's clearly not a universal.
So case closed. He was a trope theorist.
Not so fast. The huge interpretive challenge revolves around that phrase present in a subject, specifically the definition he gives. Something is in a subject if it belongs to it non-essentially and cannot exist separately from what it is in.
Okay, what's the ambiguity there?
Does cannot exist separately from what it is in mean it cannot exist separately from that specific individual subject, Socrates? If so, that sounds very much like a trope. It's non-repeatable, tied to its bearer.
Now, what's the alternative reading?
The alternative is that it just means it cannot exist separately from some subject or other. It needs a substance to inhere in, but maybe the same individual accident could, in principle, move or be shared. If that's allowed, then it looks less like a unique trope and more like a maximally determinate universal that just happens to be in one place at one time.
And the texts don't definitively settle which reading is right.
They are frustratingly ambiguous on how exactly these individual non-substances are individuated. It's a major point of debate among Neo-Aristotelians today, showing how different modern theories can plausibly claim Aristotelian roots.
Fascinating. Okay, let's shift from properties inhering in substances to the structures between them. relations. Aristotle had these as a distinct category.
He did. Things like larger than, double of, next to.
And there's often this philosophical desire, a kind of reductionist impulse, to explain relations away, right? To say they aren't fundamental.
Yes, can we explain relations just using the intrinsic non-relational properties of the things being related? The hope is that Simmias is larger than Socrates is made true solely by Simmias's intrinsic size and Socrates' intrinsic size. No need for a third larger than entity floating between them.
David Lewis's work on internal relations is relevant here.
Very relevant. Lewis defined internal relations as those whose holding supervenes entirely on the intrinsic natures of the things related. If you fix the intrinsic properties of A and B, you automatically fix whether the internal relation holds between them. Identity is a clear example.
So these internal relations are kind of ontologically freebies. They don't add anything new to the world beyond the things and their properties.
That's the idea. And the modern reductionist strategy is often to argue that most or even all seemingly fundamental relations, maybe even things like causation or spatial relations, are actually internal in this sense, or at least fully grounded in the non-relational properties of their bearers and the bearers themselves.
Like saying causation just boils down the powers or dispositions inherent in the objects involved.
Exactly. The truth maker for A caused B isn't some separate causal link, but just A's power to produce that effect and B's liability to be affected in that way, all grounded in their intrinsic natures.
But if that reduction works for all relations, as someone like Lowe might argue, does that mean relations are just gone, metaphysically speaking? Are they just convenient ways of talking?
That's the strong reductionist conclusion. If the world fundamentally contains only substances and their monadic properties, then relations become metaphysically redundant. However, the Aristotelian tradition generally resisted this complete elimination.
Why? Even if they are grounded, what's left?
Well, even if a relation like larger than is fully determined by the sizes, there still seems to be a distinctively relational aspect, a kind of directedness. Simmias is larger than Socrates that feels hard to capture purely monadically. The very act of relating seems structurally irreducible, even if its truth conditions are grounded elsewhere.
Okay. Maintaining a kind of structural role, even if not a fundamental entity. That makes sense. This leads us perfectly into talking about the thing that has the properties and stands in the relations. The substance itself. Part 3. Substance theory.
Yes, the absolute core of the Aristotelian picture. Substance plays, well, at least 3 key roles.
Okay, first role.
It's the ultimate bearer of properties. It's the thing that qualities, quantities, relations, etc. are present in. And crucially, it's not itself present in anything else. It's the fundamental subject of predication. The buck stops here.
Makes sense. Second role.
Reference magnetism. Why do we give proper names to people, pets, maybe significant objects, but not usually to their specific color or size?
Socrates gets a name, but his paleness doesn't.
Exactly. Language seems to privilege substances as the primary things we refer to, track over time, and talk about. They are natural focal points for reference.
And the third role.
Unity and integrity. Substances aren't just random collections of matter or properties. They are unified wholes. Think of Socrates, the living, breathing man, versus the collection of atoms that make him up. Or worse, the atoms after he dies. The living substance has a functional unity that the mere matter lacks.
These roles really set up a clash between different ways of thinking about what a particular is. We have the bare particular idea.
Right. The bare particular theory posits this underlying peg or substratum, which is itself completely featureless. It's just the thing that has the properties and provides numerical identity, but has no qualities itself.
Which sounds weirdly unknowable. How could you ever encounter something totally featureless?
That's the major epistemological problem, yes. It seems we're only ever acquainted with properties. Then there's the opposite extreme, bundle theory.
Bundle theory says the particular just is the bundle of its properties. No substratum needed.
Exactly. The object Socrates is the collection, set, or sum of humanity, paleness, wisdom, snub-nosedness, etc. It avoids the mysterious bare particular.
But bundle theory has its own massive problems, as Van Cleef pointed out, especially with change.
Yes, that's the killer. Qualitative change becomes deeply problematic. A bundle, especially a set, is defined by its members. If Socrates loses a property, say he gets a tan and loses paleness, or gains one, the original bundle ceases to exist, and a new, slightly different bundle comes into being.
So strictly speaking, the person who went sunbathing isn't numerically the same person as the one who comes back tanned. That sounds wrong.
It's radically counterintuitive. It makes persistence through even minor change impossible. You'd have a constant flickering stream of numerically distinct bundles replacing each other.
So how does the Aristotelian substance approach handle this? It uses that distinction between essential and accidental properties again.
Precisely. It leverages the set of versus present in distinction. A substance is what it is essentially, human, rational set of. It merely has its accidental properties, pale, tanned, here, there, present in.
So there's a core identity that persists.
Yes. You can think of it like a core bundle of essential properties, but crucially, the substance is the bearer of these properties, not just the bundle itself. This enduring essential core allows the substance, the individual, to remain numerically the same individual, even as its accidental has properties change over time.
This seems like the common sense view, and it leads us straight into the persistence debate. Endurantism versus perdurantism.
Right. Endurantism is the classic Aristotelian view aligned with that substance model. It says objects persist by being wholly present at each moment they exist. The very same numerical object endures through time and change.
That's definitely how we usually think about things. Me yesterday is the same me as me today, just maybe a bit changed.
That's the intuitive bull. Perdurantism, or four-dimensionalism, offers a very different picture. It says objects persist by having different temporal parts or stages at different times. They are extended in time like a worm.
So me yesterday and me today aren't the same wholly present object, but different temporal slices of a larger four-dimensional me.
Exactly. Persistence is like the spatial extension of a road. It persists by having different spatial parts. Perdurantists argue objects persist by having different temporal parts.
And perdurantists raise some tricky puzzles for endurantism, don't they? Like coincidence puzzles.
Yes, these are designed to show endurantism leads to paradoxes. The classic is the body versus body minus case, or similar ones like Tibble's the cat and Tibble's minus the tail.
Okay, walk us through the body minus one again. It messes with identity.
Imagine body, a normal human body, including its left hand. And imagine body minus, which is defined as that same body excluding the left hand. Before any surgery, body and body minus clearly seem non-identical, right? Body minus is a proper part of body.
Okay, seems plausible.
Now imagine the left hand is surgically removed and instantly destroyed. What's left? Well, body seems to survive this change. We survive losing a hand. And body minus also seems to survive since nothing happened to any of its parts.
Right.
But now the thing that body is and the thing that body minus is occupy the exact same space and are composed of the exact same matter. They seem to have become numerically identical.
Ah, so they were not identical before, but they are identical now. That sounds like it violates the necessity or transitivity of identity.
It does. Or the endurantist has to bite the bullet and say either A, two distinct things, body and body minus, can occupy the exact same space at the same time, or B, body minus wasn't really a distinct object to begin with, maybe by restricting principles of composition, but those moves can feel ad hoc.
How does the perdurantist avoid this?
Easily. They just say the body before severance and the body after severance are different temporal parts of the body worm. Likewise for body minus. The parts that exist after the severance might coincide, but the four-dimensional objects themselves remain distinct. No paradox.
Okay, that's one challenge. What about the problem of temporary intrinsics?
This is maybe even more direct. How can one and the same enduring object me have incompatible intrinsic properties at different times? Like being bent yesterday and straight today, or pale yesterday and tan today.
If I am wholly present both times, and paleness and tannedness are contrary intrinsic properties, it seems like I must have contrary properties simultaneously, which is impossible.
That's the charge. Endurantists have replies, of course. One popular one is time indexing properties. You don't just have the property pale, you have pale at T1 and tanned at T2. These time index properties aren't contraries, so the enduring object can have both, tenselessly.
Or you could get serious about tense.
Right, adverbialism. You say, I was pale and I am tan. The tense is doing real work. It's not the same as saying I am tenselessly pale and tanned. The properties are had in different ways related to time.
But again, the perdurantist has an easy answer.
Simple. The temporal part that is pale is just a different part of the worm from the temporal part that is tanned. No single thing ever has contrary properties. Problem solved.
So despite endurantism feeling intuitive, it faces these serious logical challenges. And even beyond persistence, the whole idea of substance, especially for everyday objects, has critics, like Simons.
Leader Simons, yeah. He argues that the things we normally call substances, people, cats, tables, don't actually meet the strict requirements for being true metaphysical substances. He has two main objections.
First one is about boundaries.
Boundary indeterminacy, or onhantic vagueness. He argues that many everyday objects seem to have fuzzy boundaries. Where exactly does the mountain end and the valley begin? Where does the cloud end? Even my own physical boundary has borderline atoms.
And if the boundaries are vague,
then the object's unity and individuation conditions are unclear. If this vagueness isn't just in our language or knowledge, but is a real feature of the object itself, onantic vagueness, then it undermines the idea of a substance as a perfectly determinate, unified whole.
Okay. And his second objection, dependence.
Ontological dependence. Simons argues ordinary objects are dependent on their parts or underlying constituents, like fundamental particles or maybe tropes in his view. A true substance should be fundamentally independent.
So if my existence depends entirely on my atoms or my tropes, then I am not the fundamental substance. I'm just a complex arrangement.
That's the idea. I'm a derivative entity, a complex structure, not a basic building block of reality. True substances, for Simons, would have to be things like perhaps fundamental particles or maybe space-time points, things that don't depend on anything else.
This really brings out that tension. Why should the things our language picks out with names, the things that seem unified to us, necessarily be the most fundamental things in reality?
Exactly, and that's a tension you even see within Aristotle himself. In the categories, individual particulars like Socrates seem primary, but in the metaphysics, he sometimes suggests the form or essence is prior, more fundamental than the composite of form and matter, which leads us perfectly into hylomorphism.
Part 4. Hylomorphism. The theory of form and matter as the principle of unity. You mentioned it answers the special composition question.
Yes, hylomorphism offers a specific answer to. When do some bits of matter compose a further single object? The answer is, when that matter is appropriately organized or unified by a form.
Not just any collection of matter counts as an object, only matter with a form.
Right. It tries to find a middle path between saying composition never happens, nihilism, and saying any arbitrary collection of matter forms an object, universalism. Form is the key.
And the classic puzzle that motivates this is the statue and the clay, Lumpel and Goliath.
Right. You have a lump of clay, Lumpel. You sculpt it into a statue of Goliath. Lumpel and Goliath seem to occupy the same space, share all the same material parts, at least for a while.
But they seem distinct. If you squash the statue, Goliath is destroyed, but Lumpel, the lump of clay, still exists, just in a different shape.
Exactly. They have different persistence conditions, suggesting they are different objects despite sharing matter and location. Hylomorphism explains this by saying they are distinct because they have different forms.
The matter is unified by the lump form in one case and the statue form in the other, and these forms dictate different ways of persisting.
Precisely. The form provides the principle of unity and identity over time. But then the big question becomes, what is this form, metaphysically speaking? Contemporary Neo-Aristotelians have proposed very different models.
Okay, what are the main options on the table today for what the form could be?
Well, one approach associated with Mark Johnston sees the form as a kind of complex unifying property or maybe a relation that holds among the material parts.
So the form is a property of the parts.
Or a relation holding between them, yes. Another view, maybe closer to Aristotle's function-based account, sees the form as a nature or a power. Thinkers like Michael Rea or William Jaworski defend this. The form is the inherent power or disposition that organizes the matter to perform its characteristic activities.
Like the power of a heart to pump blood organizes the heart tissue.
Something like that. Then there's a quite different approach that treats the form not as a property or power, but as a distinct component or part of the composite object.
A non-material part.
Yes. Kathrin Koslicki, for example, argues the form is a simple, immaterial, structural part. On her view, Lumpel and Goliath are distinct because they literally have different parts. Lumpel is clay plus lump form, Goliath is clay plus statue form. This allows her to keep standard mereology. The whole is just the sum of its parts.
But does that really explain how a simple immaterial part organizes complex matter? And isn't it a bit weird to just add an immaterial part?
Those are common criticisms, yes. It risks looking like a placeholder. This pushes some towards more radical views that maybe reject standard mereology for composites.
Like Marmodoro's idea you mentioned.
Anna Marmodoro, yeah. She suggests the form acts as an operation that essentially re-identifies the material parts as parts of this new whole. It kind of strips them of their individuality as matter and unifies them in a way that isn't just summation. The whole is metaphysically prior to the parts as parts of it. It's a strongly non-mereological picture.
Okay, lots of different ways to cash out form today. How does this connect back to Aristotle's original picture, especially with potentiality and actuality?
Aristotle explicitly links matter with potentiality, the capacity to be informed, to take on a certain structure, and form with actuality, the realized structure or function.
And change, or motion, is the link between them.
Exactly. Change is the actualization of potentiality, qua potentiality. It's the process of the matter coming to realize the form it was capable of realizing. This view gives matter several roles. It's the underlying stuff, substratum, it's what things are made of, constituent, but it's also the principle of individuation.
Right. Socrates and Callias share the same form, human, but are different individuals because they are realized in different parcels of matter.
Correct. And the prime example of form as actuality for Aristotle is the soul.
Which isn't a ghost, but the form of a living body.
Precisely. The soul is the first actuality of a natural, organized body potentially having life. It's the functional organization, the set of capacities, nutrition, perception, thought, that makes the body alive and allows it to perform its functions. It's a top-down functional explanation.
And this explains his example of the severed hand.
Yes. A hand severed from the body might look materially the same for a moment, but it's a hand in name only, homonymously, because it lacks the form. It's lost the connection to the organizing principle, the soul, that allows it to perform the function of a hand. Its matter can no longer realize that actuality.
So the form dictates the function, and the matter has to be suitable for that function.
That's key. This implies a kind of functional priority. The form might require proximate matter of a certain kind, flesh and bones organized in a specific way for a human. But the distal matter, the underlying elements like earth, air, fire, water for Aristotle, might be less constrained. The same form could potentially be realized in different underlying materials as long as they can support the necessary functions.
Multiple realizability, basically. And this distinction between proximate matter, defined by its potential for the form, and distal matter, more basic stuff, helps with that persistence issue too.
It does. The hylomorphic compound, the substance, form plus matter is the enduring thing. The form provides a continuing identity and unity, while the matter, especially the distal matter, can potentially undergo replacement or change without destroying the substance, as long as the functional organization dictated by the form is maintained.
Okay, so weaving it all together, using this Neo-Aristotelian toolkit, we've gone from the highest kinds of being categories down through properties, relations, the nature of substance itself, how it persists, and finally how it's composed through form and matter.
It's a remarkably comprehensive framework. We've seen how engaging with Aristotle provides these powerful conceptual tools: core-dependent homonymy, the property-bearer distinction, hylomorphic unity, potentiality, actuality, that structure how we can tackle these fundamental metaphysical problems today.
Absolutely. But the big, maybe slightly unsettling question that's been hovering over this whole deep dive remains, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Are we using these tools to genuinely discover the objective, mind-independent structure of reality? Or are we maybe just finding that a philosophical system developed over 2 millennia ago happens to resonate really well with our own ingrained ways of thinking about the world?
Mm-hmm.
Are we rediscovering Aristotle, or just rediscovering our own cognitive biases reflected in his system?
That is the crucial reflective question, isn't it? The Neo-Aristotelian approach clearly works in the sense that it helps articulate and address these persistent puzzles about identity, unity, and kinds. It helps us carve up the world in ways that feel natural.
But notice how often the preferred Neo-Aristotelian positions endurantism, substance as unified individuals, functional explanations align so neatly with our pre-theoretic common sense.
Exactly. And that's where the methodological caution we started with bites back. If our sophisticated metaphysical theories end up perfectly mirroring our untutored intuitions, are we really uncovering deep reality, or are we just projecting our cognitive needs onto the world? Are we mistaking familiarity for fundamental truth?
So the utility of these concepts is undeniable for philosophical problem solving. But the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over is, does that utility stem from the concepts accurately mapping the joints of reality itself?
Or does it stem from these concepts fulfilling a deep-seated human cognitive need to find stable, unified, persisting objects in a reality that might, at its most fundamental level, be far more complex, fragmented, or fluid than our substance-based intuitions want it to be?